Tonight, we journey through the stranger side of human belief, a world where luck, fear, and invisible forces shaped the rituals of daily life. A time when people carried garlic against demons, tossed coins into wells for favor, and knocked on wood to keep jealous spirits from overhearing their good fortune. Some of these superstitions came from ignorance, others from deep tradition, and a few held just enough truth to survive the centuries. But whether odd, eerie, or oddly comforting, they reveal how far people would go to feel safe in an uncertain world. So settle in as we explore 25 of the strangest superstitions in history, rituals that remind us how fragile luck once felt, and how even today we still hesitate at a black cat, a broken mirror, or the number 13. Before we begin, if you truly enjoy these stories, hitting like or subscribe helps me keep making them, and hopefully helps you keep drifting off. Let me know where you're listening from tonight. I'm always amazed by the places people tune in. Now, get comfortable, take a slow breath in, and let it out. Because once this story begins, chances are you'll be asleep before it ends. Superstition number 1, witch bottles. Long before Netflix, people had to get creative about dealing with their fears. One of the strangest solutions was something called a witch bottle. And no, it wasn't sold at the local potion aisle. A witch bottle looked ordinary enough. A clay jug or glass vessel, the kind you might expect to hold ale. But instead of beer, it held a nightmare shopping list. Rusty nails, crooked pins, hair clippings, bits of fingernail, and sometimes, a splash of urine. Because nothing says, evil spirit, stay away, quite like your own personal bathroom sample. The logic went like this: if a witch cursed you, her dark magic needed a target. The personal items inside the bottle, your hair, your nails, your bodily fluids, acted like bait. The curse would rush in, thinking it had found you, and then, boom, trapped. The nails and pins stabbed it. The liquid drowned it. The bottle became a tiny, smelly prison for evil. People buried these bottles under hearths, doorways, and garden soil, anywhere trouble might sneak in. Imagine a visitor sitting by the fire, sipping ale, completely unaware that beneath their chair was a jug filled with urine and bent metal. Cozy little place you've got here? Yes, thank you. It's guarded by a jar of toenails under the floor. Archaeologists still find them today. One was discovered in an old pub in London, stuffed with over 40 rusted pins and a bit of leather cut into a heart shape, because apparently nothing beats heartbreak like stabbing a leather heart inside a pea jar. Another turned up near a battlefield, where soldiers probably thought they needed every ounce of luck they could bottle. The bottles crossed oceans too. Colonists in America brought the tradition with them. So if you've got a suspicious lump beneath your colonial-era floorboards, congratulations, you might own an antique anti-witch security system. Daily life made these bottles feel necessary. You lived in a drafty cottage. Your cow suddenly stopped giving milk. Your child developed a fever. Naturally, you assume the neighbor who gave you the stink eye last week had hexed you. So you whipped up your own defense, armed with nothing but a jug, some bathroom breaks, and your least favorite nails. And this wasn't just backyard superstition. Written recipes for witch bottles circulated. Some advised boiling the urine with the pins inside, so the witch would feel a stabbing pain until she lifted her curse. Talk about revenge served lukewarm. Imagine the drama of the ritual. A family huddled in candlelight, father carefully filling a jug with grim determination, mother muttering a prayer, children wide-eyed, wondering why dad is putting nails in what used to be the cider jug. And then, with solemnity, the jar is buried beneath the hearth. Goodbye, evil spirits. Please enjoy your new spiky bathroom chamber. Of course, skeptics laughed at the practice even back then, but believers swore by it. If you asked someone why they hadn't fallen ill during the plague, they might just wink and tap the floorboards knowingly. Because while medicine might fail, superstition always offered an explanation. Centuries later, these bottles still tell their story. They speak of fear, of neighbors blamed for bad luck, of sickness with no known cure, of nights when the wind howled like a witch at your door. And they speak of creativity, because really, who else would invent a curse trap made of household trash? So the next time you spill a drink and grumble about bad luck, remember, things could be worse. You could be crouched in the dirt at midnight, whispering over a jug of nails and pee. And if bottles weren't enough, people found other ways to wall in their fears. Sometimes literally by hiding shoes inside the house itself. Superstition number 2, burying shoes in walls. You've probably heard of skeletons in the closet, but have you ever heard of shoes in the walls? Because for centuries, people thought the best way to protect their homes was to stuff an old boot into the chimney. This superstition stretches back to the Middle Ages. When archaeologists pry open old houses, they often find single shoes. Never pairs, hidden in the strangest places, inside walls, under floorboards, above door frames, like some ancient lost and found, run by ghosts. The logic was surprisingly simple. Shoes mold to the shape of the wearer. They carry the imprint of your toes, your step, even your sweat. So they were thought to carry a trace of the owner's spirit. If you buried one in the walls, it would act like a guard dog in leather form. Any wandering spirit, witch, or ill-meaning goblin would get confused, sniff the shoe, and hopefully leave you alone. Many of the hidden shoes discovered are children's. Tiny boots, little slippers, small enough to make you imagine a worried parent tucking them away with a whispered prayer. The idea was that the innocence of children carried protective power. Of course, it also meant your house was literally protected by the ghost of stinky toddler feet. The practice wasn't rare. Shoes have been found in houses across England, Germany, and later in colonial America and Australia. It was a superstition so common that builders almost expected to find one when tearing down old chimneys. Imagine being a mason in the 1700s, pulling out bricks and suddenly finding a centuries-old boot. You'll never guess what I found at work today. Let me guess, another shoe. And the shoes weren't always empty. Sometimes they were stuffed with other objects, bits of hair, scraps of paper, even small bones, as if the shoe alone wasn't powerful enough. So people decided to double down and make it a kind of DIY ghost trap. Your home security system, 1 part leather, 1 part superstition, 0 parts logic. There were other theories too. Some believed shoes hidden in walls encouraged fertility. The shoe was like a cradle, shaped to carry life. So hiding one was like placing a wish inside the house. Forget expensive treatments. Just bury a boot in the chimney and wait. Picture it. The house is quiet, fire crackling, shadows flickering against the walls. Someone tiptoes into the kitchen with a single, worn-out shoe. They glance around, making sure no one is watching. Then they tuck it deep into the chimney, brick it over, and go to bed, convinced the house now has an invisible protector. Good night, everyone. Don't worry, the shoe's on duty. Modern renovators still stumble across these hidden relics. Some are so well preserved, you can still see the creases and stitching. Museums even collect them, tagging them as concealed shoes, which has to be the least glamorous museum label of all time. And sure, today, the idea might sound strange, but think about it. Don't we still do the same thing? We hang lucky horseshoes, wear lucky socks, and keep childhood sneakers long past their expiration date. The superstition just isn't hidden in walls anymore. It's hanging out in closets and gym bags. So the next time you trip over an old shoe and think about tossing it, remember this. To your ancestors, that shoe wasn't garbage. It was a full-time paranormal security guard. And unlike modern alarms, it didn't need batteries. Of course, shoes weren't the only personal things people worried about. Hair and nails, the tiniest scraps of the body, were treated with equal suspicion. And that leads us to our next superstition: keeping your clippings safe before someone else used them against you. Superstition number 3, hair and nail protection. These days, when you get a haircut, the clippings just fall to the floor and get swept away. But in the past, that pile of hair would have been seen as pure, magical TNT. Because if the wrong person got hold of it, they could supposedly control your life. Hair wasn't just hair, it was basically your personal Wi-Fi signal. Cut it, drop it, and suddenly, every witch in town had your password. Nails worked the same way. Even tiny clippings were thought to contain a piece of your spirit. And so, people went to wild lengths to keep them safe. The rules were endless. Never cut your hair at night. It made you vulnerable to curses. Never trim nails on Fridays. It was bad luck. Never throw clippings into water. They might come back as snakes. And if a bird carried your nails away, rumor had it You'd fall under its spell. Imagine trying to relax, knowing pigeons might be plotting your downfall. The safest option was to destroy the evidence. Some people burned their hair and nails in the hearth, watching them curl up and vanish in smoke. Others buried them deep in the garden, as if planting a crop of personal safety. A few even fed them to animals, which is both bizarre and strangely efficient. You hungry, goat? Here, snack on my fingernails so the witches can't hex me. Children's clippings were treated with extra care. Parents sometimes sealed them into walls, tucked behind rafters, or hidden beneath floors. The idea was that a part of the child stayed protected by the house itself, which means some of the houses you walk into today might still have a baby's hair from the 1600s quietly hanging around in the woodwork. Creepy? Yes. Effective? Who's to say? Even teeth weren't safe from superstition. When a child lost a baby tooth, it was often burned, buried, or hidden. Norse warriors even believed teeth could bring luck in battle. Centuries later, that turned into something a little more whimsical, the tooth fairy. Same idea, but now with cash instead of curses. Daily life revolved around these small rituals. A farmer trims his nails by candlelight. Instead of flicking the clippings onto the floor, he gathers them carefully, drops them into the fire, and mutters a prayer. His wife collects the children's hair after a haircut and buries it near the threshold. They don't laugh about it, they take it seriously, convinced that invisible dangers lurk just beyond the door. Archaeologists sometimes find jars containing clippings tucked under old houses, bundles of hair wrapped in cloth, placed in chimneys or walls. Evidence of people who lived in constant awareness that even the smallest piece of themselves needed guarding. To them, leaving hair or nails lying around was like leaving your credit card in the street. Dangerous, reckless, unthinkable. Today, the superstition lingers in softer ways. We still talk about voodoo dolls and lockets of hair kept as tokens of love. We joke about bad hair days as if hair still carries some mysterious power over our mood. And many people still burn or bury clippings without quite knowing why. The logic may have faded, but the instinct hasn't. So the next time you sweep up your haircut, take a moment. Be grateful you live in a world where witches aren't eyeing your clippings. Or at least, if they are, you've got better defenses now than a goat with a belly full of fingernails. And while clippings had to be hidden away, some charms were carried proudly in the open, like a furry little talisman that has survived centuries of belief, the rabbit's foot. Superstition number 4, the rabbit's foot. If you've ever seen someone carrying a rabbit's foot on a keychain, you've witnessed one of history's strangest survivors, a charm that is supposed to bring good luck. Although, if you think about it, the rabbit itself was not exactly lucky. The belief goes way back. Rabbits have long been symbols of fertility, speed, and survival. They vanish into burrows, dodge predators, and produce entire rabbit families before you can blink. In ancient times, people decided these qualities must be magical, and naturally, someone thought, let's cut off the foot and carry it around, because humans are nothing if not practical in the weirdest possible ways. But not just any rabbit's foot would do. There were rules. Some traditions said it had to be the left hind foot. Others insisted it had to be taken from a rabbit killed in a graveyard. Some claimed the timing mattered. It had to be done on Friday the 13th or under a full moon. Basically, the recipe for luck sounded like the setup for a horror movie. By the 19th century, rabbits' feet were everywhere. Street vendors sold them as novelty charms. Gamblers clutched them at card tables. Actors rubbed them before walking on stage. Even politicians admitted to keeping one in their pocket during important speeches. Apparently, nothing inspires confidence in your voters like knowing you've got a dried rabbit paw in your trousers. They even made their way into fashion. People carried them on watch chains, tucked them into handbags, or dangled them from key rings. Some were dyed bright colors, blue, green, even neon pink, because nothing says ancient protective charm like hot pink rabbit fur swinging from your backpack. Imagine the feel of one. You're nervous before a big event. You reach into your pocket and rub a small, furry foot between your fingers. Soft, comforting, a little unsettling. You whisper, "Bring me luck," and step into the unknown. It wasn't just superstition. It was therapy, one paw at a time. Of course, not everyone approved. Some called it barbaric. Others dismissed it as nonsense, but plenty of people swore it worked. They told stories of winning bets, surviving storms, or escaping danger, all thanks to the furry little charm. Maybe it wasn't magic, maybe it was confidence, but in the world of superstition, confidence counts as half the spell. And like many superstitions, it was about control. Life was unpredictable. Crops failed, ships sank, illness struck without warning. But with the rabbit's foot in your pocket, you could feel just a little safer, a little braver, a little more in charge of your luck. Today, the superstition lingers more as novelty than serious belief. You'll still find rabbit's feet at fairs and souvenir shops, usually dyed in ridiculous colors. But the tradition reminds us of something bigger. How far people will go to feel fortune on their side, even if it means carrying around part of an animal in your genes. And if carrying a rabbit's foot sounds strange, wait until you hear about the next superstition, because some people didn't stop at fur, they carried the whole animal, slippery, warty, and very much alive. Superstition number 5, the toad in the pocket. Most people today carry a wallet, maybe some gum, maybe a phone. But a few centuries ago, some folks carried something far stranger, a live toad. Yes, in their pocket. Because apparently, nothing says, "I'm ready for the day," like a squirming amphibian pressed against your thigh. The superstition went like this. Toads had a reputation for soaking up illness. If you carried one close to your body, it would absorb your sickness like a slimy sponge with legs, a cough, a fever, a bad case of joint pain. The toad was supposed to pull it out of you and keep you safe. Basically, it was the medieval version of a health app, except the notifications were croaks. Some believed the toad itself had to be alive and wriggling. Others preferred dried toads, powdered toads, or tiny toad amulets, but the live version was considered most powerful. Imagine the poor creature stuffed into a pouch carried through the fields, or plunked into a pocket like a squishy coin purse. If the person got better, credit went to the toad. If they didn't, well, maybe the toad wasn't fresh enough. Farmers swore by it, soldiers too, carrying toads into battle as natural armor against wounds and infection. Some even claimed that a toad could protect against witchcraft itself. After all, witches were often pictured with toads as companions, so carrying one might confuse them, like showing up at a rival gang's meeting wearing their jacket. Daily life must have been ridiculous. Picture a man walking to the market. He pats his pocket to check if his coin is still there. Nope, just the toad. He shifts uncomfortably while the animal croaks in protest. People glance at him, whispering, "Is that a frog in your pants, or are you just... oh, never mind." There was a darker side, of course. Sometimes the toad was killed and worn in a pouch around the neck. Other times, the dried body was ground into powders and swallowed as medicine. By modern standards, it was unpleasant, unscientific, and unsanitary. But at the time, it felt like survival. If your child was sick and nothing worked, you might try anything, even slipping a toad into their bed. Folklore doubled down on the mystery. In some tales, toads carried jewels in their heads, glowing stones that gave wisdom and power. Others said witches could transform into toads, lurking in puddles to spy on villagers. So if you carried a toad in your pocket, you weren't just holding a healer. You were holding a creature balanced between magic and medicine, danger and protection. Imagine yourself at night, lying in a drafty cottage, your chest tight with fever, your family worried, and beside you, wrapped in cloth, a little toad, staring with unblinking eyes, sharing the bed like a tiny, damp roommate. It might sound absurd, but in that moment, you'd cling to the hope that its strange body could draw away the sickness. Today, of course, the superstition has hopped out of fashion. We carry hand sanitizer, vitamins, or Lucky Charms instead. But the memory of the toad in the pocket still lingers in folklore, a reminder that once upon a time, a bumpy little creature was trusted more than the village doctor. And if carrying a live toad sounds bizarre, wait until you hear what people thought about spilling something as ordinary as salt. Because a pinch on the table wasn't just a mess, it was practically an invitation to the devil. Superstition number 6, spilling salt. Salt today is just a minor inconvenience when it hits the table. You knock the shaker over, mutter a quick oops, and sweep it away. But in the past, A spilled pinch of salt was no small accident. It was an emergency. It meant the devil himself had just SVP'd to dinner. Salt was precious in earlier centuries. It preserved food in a world without refrigerators. It healed wounds, flavored meals, and carried deep symbolic weight. People called it white gold. So when you spilled it, you weren't just wasting seasoning. You were tossing away fortune itself, and possibly your future. The superstition really took hold in the Middle Ages. People believed salt had protective power, driving away evil spirits. So if it spilled, that protection vanished. Worse still, the fallen grains might attract misfortune directly. It was like rolling out a welcome mat for bad luck, and everyone knew exactly where that bad luck came from. The shadowy figure hovering over your left shoulder. That's where the famous remedy comes in. You take a pinch of the spilled salt and toss it backwards, over your left shoulder. The idea was that the devil lurked there, waiting for his chance. The salt would hit him in the eyes, blinding him and driving him away. Medieval pest control at its finest, 1 part condiment, 1 part exorcism. Imagine the scene, a medieval feast in a candlelit hall. Guests laugh, dogs beg for scraps, and suddenly, disaster. Someone tips the salt bowl. Grains scatter across the table. The laughter dies instantly. Gasps echo. Every eye turns to the poor soul responsible. Then, in a rush of panic, they scoop up a pinch and fling it over their shoulder, smacking their neighbor in the face. Congratulations, you've avoided the devil, but started a food fight. The belief was so widespread, it even crept into art. In Leonardo da Vinci's famous painting of the Last Supper, Judas Iscariot is shown with an overturned salt cellar in front of him. It was a visual clue: betrayal, bad luck, doom. Forget daggers and drama. The real giveaway was the salt spill. And the rules kept multiplying. Some people said you should never brush spilled salt into the fire, or you'd feed the flames of misfortune. Others believed the number of grains spilled predicted how bad the trouble would be. So the next time you sweep salt off your counter, just imagine medieval villagers carefully counting every single grain like accountants of doom. Even today, the superstition hasn't completely vanished. People still toss salt over their shoulder, often half joking, but still a little nervous. It's muscle memory passed down through centuries. The devil may not be at your shoulder anymore, but old habits die hard, especially habits that involve not wanting your day ruined by invisible demons. So the next time you spill salt, go ahead, toss a little over your shoulder. Worst case, you look silly. Best case, you blind a demon and keep your lunch lucky. And speaking of luck, some people preferred to hang their protection over the doorway. An iron horseshoe, gleaming like a medieval "keep out" sign for spirits. Superstition number 7, horseshoes over doors. Today, if you walk past a doorway with a horseshoe nailed above it, you probably just think, oh, rustic decor. But centuries ago, that curved piece of iron wasn't just decoration. It was a supernatural security system, a medieval do not disturb sign for evil spirits. Iron itself was considered magical. It was strong, forged in fire, and difficult for ordinary folk to make. So people believed it scared away witches, demons, and anything spooky that wandered too close. If a witch saw a horseshoe above your door, she'd think twice about stepping inside. Apparently, witches hated blacksmiths as much as bad Yelp reviews. But the horseshoe wasn't just iron, it was shaped like a crescent, and crescents had their own reputation for protection. To some, the curve looked like the horns of a bull, warding off the evil eye. To others, it was like a little half moon, catching bad luck before it slipped in. In short, one horseshoe equals double the magic points. Of course, people couldn't agree on how to hang it. Some swore it had to point upwards, like a cup, to hold the luck inside. Turn it the other way, they said, and all the luck would spill out onto the ground. Others argued it should point downwards, pouring good fortune on anyone who walked through the door. So basically, depending on who you asked, your horseshoe was either saving luck or leaking it like a broken faucet. The superstition spread far and wide. Sailors nailed horseshoes to ship masts, convinced it kept storms away. Farmers placed them in barns to protect livestock. Even churches sometimes displayed them, turning holy ground into what looked suspiciously like a medieval tack shop. And the beliefs only got stranger. Some said a horseshoe found by chance, just lying on the road, was 10 times luckier than one you bought. But only if you picked it up with your right hand, and only if the open end faced toward you. Otherwise, you were basically inviting bad luck into your pocket. It was like playing a never-ending game of lucky or not lucky, sponsored by the Blacksmiths Guild. Imagine a weary traveler in the 1600s stumbling upon a discarded horseshoe on the road. He gasps, looks around nervously, and then carefully bends to pick it up. Right hand only, mind you. Then he marches home, proudly nails it above his door, and tells the neighbors he's now invincible. All thanks to a bent piece of metal that once protected a horse's hoof from mud puddles. And yet, there's something charming about it. In a world where people had little control over plagues, storms, or wars, they grabbed at whatever symbol gave them hope. If a horseshoe helped you sleep better at night, why not? Besides, it's hard to feel intimidated by a ghost when your doorway looks ready for a barn dance. Even today, the tradition lingers. Plenty of people still hang horseshoes in their homes, barns, or shops. Some do it for luck, others for tradition, and some because it just looks nice. But the roots are there. Iron, forged in fire, shaped into a crescent, silently guarding the threshold. And if a horseshoe could protect your doorway, imagine what a stone with a hole in it could do. That's right. The next superstition brings us to the mysterious world of hag stones. Superstition number 8, hagstones. At first glance, a hagstone looks like any other rock. gray, lumpy, nothing special. But look closer and you'll notice a hole running straight through it. That's when the magic begins. Hag stones, also called witch stones, adder stones, or holy stones, were believed to have incredible protective power. If you tied one above your bed, it kept nightmares away. Hang it in your barn, and it stopped witches from cursing your cows. Wear it around your neck, and you could see through illusions, spotting fairies or ghosts hiding in plain sight. Basically, it was history's first multi-purpose app. The holes themselves were the key. People believed they weren't just empty spaces, they were windows. Peer through one, and you could glimpse into another world. Some swore they saw spirits drifting by. Others claimed the stone revealed invisible creatures, like fairies lurking in the hedgerows. And of course, if you spotted a witch, you'd know who to avoid at the next town gathering. Sailors especially loved hag stones. They tied them to ropes and nets, convinced the stones would protect them from storms and sea witches. Imagine a weathered captain gripping a holy rock, whispering, steady seas," while his crew nervously nodded. Forget compasses. Apparently, all you needed was a magic rock with a hole in it. But hagstones weren't just for protection. They also worked as charms of luck. In some villages, giving someone a hagstone was considered the ultimate friendship bracelet. A gift that said, "Here, I want you safe from witches, nightmares, and the occasional fairy prank." Much more thoughtful than socks. And of course, there were rules. You couldn't just grab any rock with a hole and declare it magical. The hole had to be made naturally, by water, wind, or time. If you drilled it yourself, nice try, but no magic for you. The stone had to be shaped by the world, not by your hammer, which makes sense. Spirits are picky about authenticity. Picture yourself walking along a riverbank in the 1600s. You spot a round stone with a hole right through its middle. You bend down, pick it up, and peer through it. Suddenly, the reeds look different. The water ripples strangely. Is it your imagination? Or did you just glimpse something you weren't supposed to see? Either way, the stone goes straight into your pocket, your new supernatural bodyguard. Folklore stretched even further. Some people believed hagstones could heal illness if dipped in water. Others thought tying one to your bedpost stopped witches from stealing your breath at night. A few even said the hole acted like a trap, sucking in evil and keeping it locked away. A free ghost vacuum, courtesy of Mother Nature. Today, hagstones still have a small cult following. Collectors keep them on shelves, beachcombers search for them on vacations, and modern pagans use them in rituals. And honestly, even without the superstition, they look cool. A rock with a window feels like a tiny miracle, like nature accidentally built you a peephole into mystery. So next time you find one, hold it up to your eye. Maybe you'll just see the world framed in stone. Or maybe, if you're lucky or unlucky, you'll glimpse something else staring back. And speaking of everyday things turned magical, our next superstition takes us straight to the dinner table, where even bread wasn't safe from suspicion. Superstition number 9, making the sign of the cross on bread. Bread has always been serious business. In medieval Europe, bread wasn't just food, it was survival. So naturally, people came up with all kinds of rules to make sure their loaves stayed safe from bad luck. One of the strangest? Before cutting into a fresh loaf, you had to carve a little cross on the top. The idea was simple. The cross blessed the bread. It kept away evil spirits, witches, or wandering demons who apparently spent their evenings sniffing around bakeries. It also made sure the bread rose properly in the oven, which was important because nothing ruined dinner faster than a flat loaf cursed by bad vibes. People took this seriously. Families would bake, pull out a steaming loaf, and immediately score the sign of the cross before anyone touched it. It wasn't just ritual, it was insurance. Imagine sitting down to supper and someone forgets to cross the bread. Everyone gasps. Grandma clutches her chest. The family dog whimpers. You quickly carve the cross like your life depends on it, because in their minds, it kind of did. Bread was tied to survival, but also to religion. In Christian Europe, the cross turned ordinary food into something sacred. It was a way of thanking God and warding off misfortune at the same time. Spiritual blessing plus ghost protection, 2 for 1. Basically, every loaf was holy toast. And if you think that's odd, the rules about bread didn't stop there. Some believed cutting both ends off a loaf would bring bad luck. Others warned never to turn bread upside down. It supposedly invited the devil to dinner. And heaven help you if you dropped a slice on the floor. You had to kiss it before putting it back on the table, or risk insulting the heavens. Imagine the pressure of being a medieval baker. You're working at dawn, sweat dripping, dough rising, fire roaring in the oven, and on top of feeding the entire town, you also have to make sure your bread doesn't let demons slip through the crust. Talk about a stressful work environment. But to people of the time, it made sense. Bread wasn't just calories, it was life itself. Protecting it was protecting the family. So carving a cross was less about superstition and more about peace of mind. After all, if the loaf came out perfect, who was going to argue? Even today, traces of the tradition remain. In some cultures, bakers still score loaves with crosses before baking, more for heritage than fear. And in rural kitchens, old sayings about blessing the bread linger in whispers. It's superstition turned tradition, quiet, harmless, and oddly comforting. So the next time you slice into a warm loaf, think of your ancestors. They weren't just hungry. They were on high alert for bread demons. And with one quick cut of the knife, they kept dinner and their souls safe. And while bread was protected by crosses, another beloved staple, beer, came with its own superstition. One that said even the froth in your mug could decide your fortune. Superstition number 10, beer froth and bad luck. Beer has always been more than a drink. In medieval Europe, it was breakfast, lunch, dinner, and sometimes safer than water. But beer also carried its own superstition. Spill the froth, the creamy head on top, and you weren't just wasting good foam, you were wasting your luck. People believed the froth itself held fortune. The bubbles rising in the mug were tiny pockets of blessing floating up from the brew. If they spilled onto the table, you'd lose your good fortune for the day. And worse, whoever caught the foam might steal your luck for themselves. Imagine losing your promotion to the guy who just wiped up your spill with a crust of bread. This made taverns a tense place. Picture a crowded inn, mugs slamming, songs roaring. Someone spills their beer. Conversation halts. All eyes turn to the froth sliding across the table. A friend lunges forward with a rag. "Don't touch it," the drinker shouts, swatting them away. "The devil can have my soul, but nobody takes my beer luck." Some regions added more flair to the belief. In parts of Germany, spilling froth was said to anger household spirits. They might sour your milk, spoil your bread, or even knock over your next pint just for fun. In other places, foam left untouched was thought to invite poverty, so people became very serious about pouring carefully. No bartender wanted to be known as the one who cost customers their future. Of course, beer was already linked to luck in other ways. Toasting was more than clinking mugs. It was a way to share fortune, spreading good vibes like liquid Wi-Fi. But if you spilled before the toast, that was it. The night was doomed. You might as well go home, crawl into bed, and wait for the disaster to arrive. Imagine the stress of being a medieval brewer. You've perfected your recipe, tended your barrels, tapped the cask with pride, and then someone spills their froth and curses your name. Your beer ruined my luck. You just wanted to sell ale, and now you're responsible for someone's lost sheep or broken wagon. But beer superstitions weren't all negative. In some towns, the very first foam of a fresh barrel was seen as lucky if you drank it fast enough. It was like catching the first star of the evening. Drink it, and your week would be blessed. Miss it, and well, enjoy 7 days of soggy bread and stubbed toes. Even today, echoes of the superstition remain. We still treat spilling a drink as bad luck, often with a groan and a nervous laugh. Some people even tap the table after a toast, a tiny ritual to seal the fortune in. The devil may not hover over spilled foam anymore, but no one likes to waste it either. So next time you pour a pint, take care with the froth. Let it settle, let it rise, but don't let it spill. Because somewhere deep in the past, a chorus of medieval drinkers is still muttering, "Careful, careful, that foam is your fortune." And speaking of things in the sky that could shift your luck, our next superstition warns you never, ever to point at a rainbow. Superstition number 11, pointing at rainbows. Rainbows are supposed to be happy. Bright colors stretched across the sky, promises of peace, symbols of hope. But in some cultures, pointing at one was practically asking for disaster. Stick out a finger and you might be cursed with bad luck, or worse, a shorter life. The logic was murky, but the fear was real. Rainbows were seen as bridges between worlds, connections between heaven and earth. To point at one was to disrespect the divine. It was like poking your finger into the universe's most sacred painting. And apparently, the universe didn't take kindly to rude gestures. Parents warned children sternly, "Don't point at the rainbow, or you'll lose a finger. Don't point, or you'll invite illness. Don't point, or you won't live to see the next rainbow," which must have made for some very tense family walks after a storm. In some traditions, the rainbow wasn't just a pretty arc, it was alive. A serpent in the sky, coiled in brilliant colors, and you don't point at a serpent unless you're ready for it to notice you. So keeping your hands firmly in your pockets was considered the safest option. Imagine a group of medieval villagers standing outside after a rain. A massive rainbow arcs across the sky. One child gasps, raises a finger to show everyone, and instantly gets smacked on the hand by their mother. "Do you want us all cursed?" she hisses. The child sulks, rubbing their knuckles, while the villagers admire the rainbow in total silence, hands glued firmly to their sides. Other versions of the superstition turned the rainbow into a warning. Point at one, and you draw storms, famine, or misfortune. Even sailors believed rainbows had to be treated with care. A rainbow over the sea was both a promise of safe passage and a threat of shifting weather. Better to nod politely at the sky than to poke your finger at it. Of course, not all cultures saw rainbows this way. In Norse mythology, the rainbow bridge, Bifrost, was the path the gods used to travel between realms. In Ireland, rainbows led to pots of gold, but even in these traditions, pointing was rare. It was one thing to look in awe. It was another to jab your finger at something sacred. Modern echoes still exist. In some rural areas, older generations still warn against pointing at rainbows. Even if people laugh, there's often a nervous glance skyward, because deep down, superstition has a way of clinging to us, like rain on our clothes after a storm. So the next time a rainbow arcs overhead, admire it all you want. Smile, take a picture, maybe even make a wish, but keep your hands at your sides, because whether or not the curse is real, no one wants to risk angering a seven-colored serpent in the sky. And while rainbows could bring danger if pointed at, mirrors brought their own brand of bad luck if you broke them. 7 years worth, to be exact. Superstition number 12, breaking mirrors. If you've ever dropped a mirror and watched it shatter, you probably felt that sinking feeling. Not just because of the mess, but because of the superstition. 7 years of bad luck. 7 whole years. Long enough to regret your clumsiness every single day. The idea comes from the belief that mirrors reflect more than faces. They reflect the soul itself. Break one, and you damage not just your reflection, but your spirit. It was like smashing your cosmic selfie into 1,000 pieces. The 7 years part had its own logic. Romans believed the human body renewed itself every 7 years. So if your soul got cracked in a mirror accident, it would take 7 years to repair itself, which meant you were stuck waiting, one unlucky day at a time, until your soul's warranty reset. People went to extremes to avoid the curse. If a mirror broke, there were rituals to fix the damage. One remedy said you had to bury the shards in moonlight. Another claimed you could wash them in running water to cleanse the bad luck away. And of course, some just muttered a prayer and swept the pieces very, very carefully, hoping not to slice open their future as well as their hand. Imagine living in a medieval cottage with only one precious mirror. It's rare, expensive, polished metal, or early glass, worth more than your furniture combined. And then your cat knocks it over. Crash. Your family gasps. You don't just mourn the loss of the mirror. You brace yourself for nearly a decade of stubbed toes, spoiled milk, and cows that refuse to give milk. Artists and storytellers piled onto the idea. Tales of haunted mirrors circulated where spirits lived inside the glass. Some said a broken mirror could release those spirits into your home. Others believed the shattered reflection multiplied your bad luck, scattering it into as many pieces as the shards. If you dropped one, you weren't just clumsy, you'd basically detonated a curse grenade. Of course, some people found workarounds. In certain traditions, if you immediately grabbed a shard and touched it to a gravestone, you cancelled the curse. Others said grinding the shards into dust made the bad luck harmless. And if all else failed, you could always blame the cat. Cats have been taking the fall for human mistakes for centuries. Even today, the superstition clings to us. Plenty of people laugh it off, but still get a little nervous when a mirror cracks. 7 years of bad luck feels like too much of a gamble, even if you don't believe. So you sweep carefully, whisper an apology to the universe, and try not to look directly at your broken reflection on the way to the trash. So the next time you handle a mirror, take your time, hold it gently, step carefully, and maybe move the cat out of the room. Because while 7 years is a long time to heal a soul, it's even longer to explain to your friends why you suddenly trip over air every time you walk. And if mirrors warned of bad luck when broken, pies promise the opposite, as long as you remembered to pinch the very first one. Pie superstition number 13. Pinch of the first pie. Nothing says comfort like pie. Golden crust, steaming filling, the smell drifting through the kitchen. But in Old England, pie wasn't just food, it was fortune. And if you wanted that fortune to last, you had to pinch the very first pie. The superstition went like this. The first pie baked in a new oven or in a new home carried powerful luck. But you couldn't just cut into it like a normal person. Someone had to pinch a piece from the crust, usually with fingers, before anyone ate. That little pinch was supposed to seal good fortune for the household. Forget pinching pennies. Our ancestors pinched pastry. If you didn't, the belief went, the house might fall into misfortune. Crops would fail. Children would sicken. Livestock would wander off. All because you didn't treat your pie with the respect it deserved. Imagine the scene. A fresh pie cools on the hearth. Family members gather, hungry and eager. But instead of slicing it open, everyone waits nervously. Grandmother steps forward, pinches a tiny bit from the crust, and mutters a blessing. Only then does the feast begin. No pinch, no pie. Rules are rules. Some regions added their own twists. In parts of England, the pinch was buried in the garden, feeding the soil with luck. Elsewhere, it was fed to the family dog, so the household guardian shared in the blessing. One unlucky mutt probably ate more dry pie crust than meat in its entire life. The superstition made its way into special occasions too. Weddings, for instance, often featured a lucky pie. The bride or groom pinched the crust to ensure prosperity in marriage, because apparently nothing says eternal love like desecrating dessert. And of course, it tied back to the symbolism of bread and grain. Pies were seen as gifts of the earth. Blessing them by pinching or marking was a way of protecting the harvest. If the pie turned out well, it meant the land was fertile and the future bright. If not, well, better start hiding shoes in the walls again. Picture the pressure on bakers. Not only did they have to master crust and filling, but they also carried the weight of their customers' future luck. Your pie burned, sir. Sorry about your doomed harvest and the angry spirits. That'll be 2 shillings. Even today, echoes of this superstition survive. Some families insist on taking the first bite in a ceremonial way. Others save the first slice for the oldest person at the table. We may not call it a superstition anymore, but the instinct to treat the first piece as special hasn't gone away. So next time you bake a pie, try it yourself. Pinch a piece of crust before serving. It may not change your luck, but it will make you feel connected to a long, crumbly chain of history. And honestly, any excuse to eat pie a little faster is good enough. But while pies could bless your future, another everyday item carried nothing but risk if handled the wrong way. Open an umbrella indoors, and you weren't just clumsy, you were doomed. Superstition number 14, opening umbrellas indoors. Today, opening an umbrella inside is mostly just annoying. You knock over a lamp, smack your sibling in the face, and suddenly, you've got bad manners. But for centuries, it wasn't just rude, it was dangerous. The kind of bad luck that could shadow you for years. The superstition likely began with the umbrella's original purpose, long before they were rain shields. Umbrellas were sunshades for royalty. They symbolized dignity, wealth, and divine protection. So opening one indoors, away from the sun, was basically mocking the heavens. It was like saying, "Thanks, cosmic forces, but I'll handle this myself." The universe apparently did not appreciate sarcasm. Others believed it was about spirits. An umbrella opening inside created a barrier, blocking invisible guardians who watched over the household. Snap it open, and suddenly the protective energy couldn't flow. You disrupted your spiritual Wi-Fi, and good luck dropped out like a bad connection. And then there was the practical side. Old umbrellas weren't sleek little folding models. They were big, awkward contraptions with sharp metal ribs. Opening one indoors was a great way to poke someone's eye or shatter the nearest jar of pickled onions. Naturally, people started associating umbrella mishaps with bad luck. It wasn't just superstition, it was physics with a grudge. Imagine a cramped 18th century sitting room. Low ceilings, crowded furniture, candles flickering on shelves. Someone pops open a massive umbrella just to dry it out. The flame catches the fabric. The cat leaps in terror, and suddenly half the household is screaming. Of course they called it bad luck. Anything else would have been too embarrassing. The belief spread quickly. From England to America, parents warned children sternly, "Never open that umbrella indoors. You'll bring disaster." Some swore it caused illness. Others claimed it invited financial ruin. Still others whispered it might even summon death. All from the simple click of a latch and the whoosh of fabric. People developed little rules to dodge the curse. If you absolutely had to open an umbrella inside, say, to let it dry, you needed to whisper a blessing, cross your fingers, or touch wood afterward. Basically, you could try, but you had to bribe fate to let it slide. The superstition lingers even now. Plenty of people laugh at it, but still hesitate. The thought of opening an umbrella in the living room just feels wrong, like tempting fate. You don't want to find yourself tripping over your shoelaces later and muttering, "Yep, should have kept the umbrella closed." So next time it rains, remember, keep the umbrella for the outdoors. Inside, just hang it on the rack and let it drip politely. Your house will stay drier, calmer, and according to your ancestors, a whole lot luckier. And if umbrellas could twist your fortune indoors, birds could twist it outdoors. Because according to superstition, the simple act of counting crows could predict your future. Superstition number 15. Counting crows. If you've ever spotted a crow sitting on a fence, you may have felt a little uneasy. One bird alone always seems ominous. But in old superstition, the number of crows you saw wasn't just scenery, it was prophecy. The rhyme went something like this. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told. Basically, fortune telling with feathers. Imagine villagers trudging to work, glancing at the sky, nervously muttering rhymes as crows cawed overhead. Spot one. Great. Now the whole day was ruined. Spot two. Relief. You could smile again. Spot 3 or 4. Congratulations. You were about to learn something about your future children, whether you wanted to or not. Crows already had a dark reputation. They ate carrion, lingered around battlefields, and their black feathers seemed to drink up the light. So of course, people assumed they carried omens. Birds weren't just birds. They were cosmic messengers, squawking updates from the universe. A feathered news service, minus the subscription fee. Farmers took it seriously. If a flock appeared in the fields, they'd stop their work, count quickly, and decide whether to keep planting or retreat inside. A wrong number could mean storms, sickness, or a broken plow. All because some crows decided to have a family meeting on your fence post. The superstition made its way into songs and rhymes that children still chant today. But back then, it wasn't just a nursery game. It was a rule book for survival. You didn't ignore a crow any more than you ignored a priest, a doctor, or your mother yelling at you to put on clean socks. Picture a medieval traveler on a lonely road. The wind rustles, the trees creak, and then caw. A crow lands on the path. The traveler freezes, counts carefully. Just one. Their stomach sinks. They grip their walking stick tighter, convinced the day now carries sorrow in its shadow. Of course, skeptics mocked it. After all, crows are everywhere. By the logic of the rhyme, your life would swing wildly from joy to sorrow to secrets and back again, depending on how many birds happen to show up that morning. But for believers, that was the point. The world was mysterious, and crows gave it shape. The superstition still lingers. Modern versions of the rhyme appear in TV shows, books, and even wedding traditions. And plenty of people still get an odd chill when they see a lone crow perched nearby. We may not pause to recite the rhyme anymore, but the instinct to count, to measure fate in feathers, remains. So the next time you see a crow, don't just shoo it away. Take a breath, count carefully. Maybe it means joy. Maybe it means sorrow. Or maybe it means you've just walked into the world's oldest bird-based math problem. And while crows carried omens in the sky, cats carried them on the ground, especially if one black cat happened to cross your path. Superstition number 16. Black cats crossing your path. Black cats are sleek, mysterious, and, if you believe centuries of superstition, walking bad luck machines. For generations, people trembled if a black cat dared to cross their path. One step from that furry shadow, and suddenly, your future was doomed. The fear goes back to the Middle Ages. Cats were already suspicious creatures, silent, sharp-eyed, and far too good at sneaking around at night. Black ones, blending into the darkness seemed even more supernatural, so people linked them to witches. A black cat on your path wasn't just an animal, it was possibly a witch's spy, or worse, the witch herself in disguise. The superstition spread quickly. Sailors refused to board ships if a black cat was seen near the gangplank. Travelers turned back rather than walk past one. Some households even believed a black cat that entered uninvited brought death within the year, all from a creature that just wanted a saucer of milk. And yet, here's the twist. In other places, black cats were considered lucky. In Scotland, one appearing on your porch meant prosperity was coming. In Japan, single women believed owning a black cat actually increased their chances of finding love. Apparently, even Cupid respected the whiskers. So depending on where you lived, that midnight furred feline was either a curse or a cosmic blessing. Imagine walking through a medieval village at dusk. A black cat darts across the path in front of you. Half the crowd gasps, clutching their charms and backing away. The other half smiles, tossing it a scrap of food and whispering, "Good fortune." Meanwhile, the cat just sits there licking its paw, completely unaware it has just destroyed or saved someone's entire week. The rhyme and rule culture added fuel to the fear. Some said if the cat crossed left to right, it was good luck. Right to left, terrible luck. Others said you could break the curse by spitting 3 times or by taking 12 steps backward before moving forward again, which meant village roads must have looked like impromptu dance rehearsals every time a cat strolled through. Black cats also appeared in folklore as guardians. Fishermen's wives kept them at home, believing they kept their husbands safe at sea. Farmers valued them as mousers and saw their sleek coats as a sign of health. But despite these positive spins, the bad luck cat reputation stuck stubbornly in much of Europe and America. Even today, echoes linger. Some people still hesitate when a black cat crosses their driveway. Halloween decorations lean into the spooky stereotype, and shelters report that black cats are often the hardest to adopt, thanks to old superstitions. All because of a myth that gave too much credit to a creature, whose biggest ambition is usually a nap in the sun. So the next time a black cat crosses your path, don't panic. It isn't a witch in disguise. It isn't bad luck hunting you down. It's just a cat, probably on its way to ignore someone else. And if cats weren't enough to make you nervous, shoes carried their own share of spooky baggage too, especially when it came to rocking chairs. Superstition number 17. Rocking chairs and shoes. A rocking chair looks harmless, gentle, creaky, maybe a little spooky if it moves by itself. But in old superstition, rocking an empty chair or letting shoes sit on it was practically asking for trouble. The belief was simple. An empty chair that rocked on its own was seen as an invitation. Spirits, it was said, might take it as a sign they were welcome to sit down. And once a ghost gets comfortable in your furniture, good luck getting it to leave. Basically, You just rented your rocking chair to the afterlife. No deposit required. But shoes on a rocking chair? That was even worse. People believed it brought death to the household. The logic went like this. Shoes were tied to journeys, and placing them on a rocking chair symbolized the final journey into the grave. So if someone set a pair of boots rocking gently, neighbors might already start planning the funeral. Imagine a cramped farmhouse in the 1800s. A child kicks off their muddy shoes and tosses them onto the rocking chair. Instantly, their mother gasps, snatches them up and scolds. "Do you want to kill us all?" The child blinks, confused. They were just trying to keep the floor clean. But in that moment, they'd apparently endangered the entire family. Some stories even warned against rocking an empty chair yourself. If you gave it a push without sitting, it meant bad luck was on its way. You were stirring the air, inviting spirits, or tempting fate. In short, rocking chairs weren't toys. They were supernatural hot seats. The superstition spread widely. In Ireland, Scotland, and the American South, rocking chairs carried an eerie reputation. Front porches creaked with them, but people avoided setting them in motion unless someone was seated. An idle rocker wasn't just unsettling, it was dangerous. Shoes themselves carried plenty of symbolic weight. We've already seen them hidden in chimneys for luck, but put them in the wrong place, a rocking chair, and suddenly they spelled doom. It shows how much meaning people poured into everyday objects. The same boots that protected you on the road could curse you at home, depending on where you left them. Picture yourself late at night. The fire is low, the house is quiet. The rocking chair in the corner creaks suddenly, shifting gently, as though someone just sat down. You stare at it, heart racing. Is it the wind, the floor settling? Or did something unseen just accept your unspoken invitation? You tell yourself it's nothing, but still, you slide your shoes far, far away. Even today, the superstition hasn't entirely vanished. Plenty of people feel uneasy about a rocking chair moving on its own, and in some families, you'll still get scolded for tossing shoes on one. Old habits and old fears linger in the creak of the wood. So next time you see a rocking chair, treat it with respect. Sit in it, sure, but don't leave it empty and swaying. And definitely don't park your sneakers on it, unless, of course, you're ready for a ghostly roommate who refuses to chip in for rent. And while shoes on chairs spelled misfortune, bells rang with the opposite effect, keeping evil away with every joyful chime. Superstition number 18. Bells to ward off evil. Today, bells usually mean celebration. Church weddings, school dismissals, holiday jingles. But in old superstition, bells weren't just cheerful sounds. They were weapons, tiny sonic shields against evil. The idea was simple. Spirits, witches, and demons hated noise, especially the sharp, ringing sound of a bell. So every time a bell chimed, It was like firing an invisible cannon blast at the forces of darkness. Forget swords and armor. All you needed was a good set of church bells. This belief echoed across Europe. When storms rolled in, villages would ring bells to drive away evil spirits in the clouds. Church towers thundered with sound, not just as warnings of danger, but as active weapons against lightning and hail. People believed the noise broke apart storms themselves. Science may disagree, but when you're in a thunderstorm, extra noise can feel oddly reassuring. Cattle even got their own bells, not just so farmers could hear them grazing, but to protect them from curses. A cow with a bell around its neck wasn't just easy to find. It was magically guarded from witches who might try to sour its milk. So if you ever wondered why cows got accessorized, the answer is fashion plus ghost insurance. The belief reached homes too. Tiny bells were hung on doors to keep out wandering spirits. Newborns sometimes had bells placed near their cradles to stop evil from sneaking close. Even funeral processions used them, ringing softly to guide the soul safely onward, while scaring away anything that might interfere. Imagine living in a medieval village at dusk. The sky darkens, thunder grumbles. You hear the church bells begin to roar across the fields. Families step out of cottages, nodding in relief. The sound isn't just noise, it's comfort. Proof that someone, somewhere, is keeping the darkness at bay with nothing more than metal and rope. And it wasn't just Europe. Across cultures, bells carried protective power. In Japan, wind chimes were thought to keep away evil spirits during the summer. In India, temple bells were rung to chase off demons before prayers. Everywhere you looked, humans seemed to agree. If you can't fight the unseen, at least annoy it into leaving. Of course, skeptics laughed. Some pointed out that storms kept coming no matter how loudly you rang. But believers didn't waver. Even if the storm still raged, at least they felt braver, steadier, less helpless. And sometimes, superstition works best as comfort, not as fact. Even today, the tradition lingers. We hang jingle bells on doors. We set wind chimes outside windows. We smile at the soft sound, never admitting that somewhere deep down, it still feels protective. Old instincts die hard, especially when they come with such a pleasant soundtrack. So the next time you hear a bell ring, think of it not just as music, but as history's alarm system. A centuries-old way of saying, stay back, evil, you're not welcome here. And if bells could scare spirits away, another superstition warned that knives could draw them close, especially if you left one sitting out the wrong way. Superstition number 19. Knives as bad omens. Knives are useful things. They chop vegetables, carve meat, and make you look dramatic if you gesture with one while telling a story. But in superstition, knives were dangerous long before anyone swung them. Even sitting still, they could attract bad luck. One common belief was that leaving a knife stuck upright in a table was an invitation to death. The blade pointing upward symbolized violence, like a silent challenge to the universe. People whispered that if you walked away without removing it, someone in the household would soon fall ill, or worse. So the rule was simple: knives belong flat, never standing like soldiers on alert. Another warning: never give a knife as a gift. It was said to cut the friendship. Hand someone a blade, and your bond would split as cleanly as butter under steel. The only way to dodge the curse was for the receiver to hand back a coin, turning the gift into a purchase. So technically, every gifted knife came with a tiny ransom fee attached. Knives also carried baggage at the dinner table. In some places, crossing a knife and fork on your plate meant an argument was coming. Drop a knife accidentally, and it foretold the arrival of a man. Drop a fork, and a woman would soon appear. Drop a spoon, and apparently you'd invented gender-neutral prophecies. Imagine a medieval family supper. The table is crowded with bread, stew, and trenches. A child accidentally drops a knife, and the whole family gasps. Quick, tidy the house. A man is coming. Minutes later, a traveling peddler knocks on the door, and everyone nods with wide-eyed certainty. Coincidence? Maybe. But to them, proof the knife had spoken. Folklore stretched the danger even further. Some said, never cross two knives on the table, or you'd invite quarrels into the home. Others warned against stirring food with a blade, as it poisoned the dish with anger. In short, knives were for cutting, not for playing cosmic dress-up. And then there was the ultimate fear: a falling knife. If one slipped from your hand and stuck upright in the floor, it was said to mean death was on its way, which turned every kitchen accident into a full-blown panic. Trip once, and suddenly the household was mourning before the soup was even served. Of course, some people flipped the belief around. A knife placed under the bed was said to cut through nightmares. Others slid a blade under a pillow to protect against spirits. Apparently, knives could either doom you or defend you, depending on how politely you asked. Even today, echoes remain. People still hesitate to give knives as gifts without including a coin, and a knife stuck upright in the ground feels unsettling, even if you don't believe in omens. The superstition lingers, sharp as ever. So next time you handle a knife, remember, keep it flat, keep it friendly, and maybe slip in a coin if you're giving one away. Because nobody wants their friendship diced along with the vegetables. And finally, for our last superstition, if knives cut ties, ladders cut paths, because walking under one was considered one of the worst omens of all. Superstition number 20, walking under ladders. Most people don't think twice about ladders. They're tools, wood, nails, rungs, and not much else. But step beneath one, and suddenly even the bravest soul hesitates, because walking under a ladder has long been seen as tempting fate. The superstition comes from more than clumsiness. Yes, something might fall on your head, but the fear ran deeper. In ancient Egypt, the shape of a triangle was sacred. It symbolized stability, strength, and the gods themselves. A ladder leaning against a wall formed a triangle, and stepping through it wasn't just careless, it was sacrilege, a violation of geometry blessed by the divine. In Christian Europe, the ladder gained another shadow. One was said to have leaned against the cross during the crucifixion. Ever since, it carried an association with betrayal, suffering, and death. To pass beneath it was to invite those same shadows onto yourself. Folklore piled on even more warnings. Some believed spirits lingered in the empty space of the ladder, waiting for a careless soul to brush by. Others said the triangle trapped bad luck like a snare, releasing it only on those foolish enough to step inside. Picture a cobbled street in the Middle Ages. A painter props his ladder against a wall. A villager approaches, basket in hand. The ladder is tall, the street is narrow. Does she duck underneath or cross the muddy road to avoid it? The choice feels like life or death. Even today, the instinct remains. Workers set up ladders on sidewalks and pedestrians hesitate. Some squeeze against traffic rather than slip below the rungs. Others laugh nervously, step under, then mutter a prayer or knock the nearest wood to undo the curse, because superstition is sticky. Even if you don't believe, your body still flinches. Your hand still twitches toward the desk, the bench, or the door frame. And that reflex leads us to the next superstition, the small, nervous habit of knocking on wood to keep fortune from slipping away. Superstition number 21, knocking on wood. Everyone knows the move. You brag about something. I've never broken a bone, or this car has never failed me. And then, almost instinctively, you rap your knuckles against the nearest wooden surface, a desk, a chair, even a fake wood countertop if that's all you've got. It seems like a silly habit, but knocking on wood is one of the most widespread and long-lasting superstitions in the world. A nervous, little tap that supposedly keeps bad luck from overhearing your confidence. The origins stretch back thousands of years. Some say it began with the Celts, who believed spirits lived inside trees. Tap the bark, and you were either thanking them for protection or distracting them so they wouldn't steal your luck. Others point to Christian Europe, where touching wood was linked to the wood of the cross, a sacred reminder that protection could be found in faith. Over time, the meanings tangled together, but the ritual stayed the same. Whenever luck seemed too good, you gave the nearest bit of wood a quick knock. Imagine life in a medieval village. A farmer boasts, "My cow's been healthy all year." The moment the words leave his lips, his neighbor gasps. "Knock the table," she hisses. He thumps his fist against the wooden bench, while the cow outside mooed in blissful ignorance. because better to bruise your knuckles than invite disease into the barn. The superstition spread everywhere. Sailors knocked on wooden masts before a voyage. Soldiers tapped the wooden handles of their weapons. Children touched wooden toys before a game. It wasn't just luck, it was insurance. And in a world full of storms, plagues, and sudden misfortune, insurance mattered. Folklore added endless rules. Some said you had to knock 3 times. Others insisted only the first tap counted. A few believed you had to touch real wood, not painted or polished surfaces, because spirits could apparently tell the difference between oak and plywood. Archaeologists and historians even trace versions of the ritual across cultures. In Turkey, people tap wood twice and then pull their earlobes. In Italy, they mutter, "Tocca ferro," touch iron, but the meaning is the same. Ward off jinxes. It's proof that humanity, everywhere, developed little rituals to shield themselves from envy, fate, or the invisible listening ear of the universe. Picture a candlelit tavern in the 1500s. A traveler brags he's never lost money on the road. The crowd groans, slapping tabletops in unison. The sound echoes like a drumline of desperation. Better safe than sorry, because fortune has a way of punishing arrogance. Even skeptics couldn't shake the habit. A nobleman might laugh at peasants for their silly customs, but if he mentioned his good health, he'd quietly touch the wooden arm of his chair anyway. Because why risk it? Superstition doesn't need belief, it just needs caution. The tradition lives on today, centuries later. Athletes tap wooden benches before games. Office workers wrap their desks after boasting about easy deadlines. Parents knock on cribs when admiring their baby's good sleep. Most don't even know why, they just do it. Part joke, part genuine reflex. And maybe that's the real power of superstition. It offers comfort, even if the logic is shaky. One quick tap, and suddenly, the future feels less threatening. So the next time you find yourself bragging about your luck, don't feel silly when your hand drifts toward the table. Give it a knock, because whether it's calling on spirits, echoing ancient faith, or just calming your nerves, the sound of knuckles on wood has been humanity's favorite safety net for millennia. And while wood was trusted to keep luck close, another superstition swore that garlic could do the opposite, driving evil far, far away. Superstition number 22, garlic against evil. Garlic today is mostly known for flavor. It makes pasta sing, stews richer, and bread almost divine. But for centuries, garlic wasn't just food, it was armor. A pungent shield against demons, witches, and the restless dead. The superstition goes deep. In ancient Rome, soldiers munched garlic before marching to battle. Not for taste, but for protection. Garlic was thought to harden the body, sharpen courage, and make it harder for dark forces to whisper curses into your ear. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, garlic braids were hung over doorways. They weren't decorative, they were sentries. A string of cloves meant witches couldn't cross the threshold, demons couldn't step inside, and vampires wouldn't dare linger. The smell itself was believed to repel evil, and let's be honest, it probably did keep strangers at bay. Imagine a family huddled inside a thatched cottage. It's midnight. The wind howls, dogs bark, and shadows stretch across the floor. On the wooden beams above the door, garlic bulbs sway gently in the draft. The parents whisper to their children, "Don't worry. Nothing evil can cross while the garlic watches." The children drift to sleep, comforted not by reason, but by the sharp aroma of cloves overhead. Across cultures, garlic carried this same supernatural weight. In Slavic folklore, it was rubbed on windows and smeared on cradles to keep vampires away. In Greece, people wore it like a charm during festivals, a way to deflect envy and the evil eye. Even in Asia, garlic was seen as cleansing, a way to banish spirits that lingered too close to the living. No matter where you went, garlic wasn't just seasoning, it was spiritual pest control. And it wasn't always subtle. Folk doctors prescribed garlic necklaces for the sick, believing disease itself was a kind of demon that could be chased away by smell. Travelers tucked cloves in their bags to ward off thieves, convinced garlic's power extended to human villains too. And when livestock fell ill, farmers rubbed garlic on the stable doors, just in case the cause wasn't natural, but supernatural. Of course, garlic also entered legend through the most famous monster of them all, vampires. Stories whispered that bloodsuckers couldn't bear the scent. Some claimed it burned their skin. Others said it weakened them, like sunlight in bulb form. That's why vampire hunters in old tales stuffed garlic into wounds, packed it around graves, and carried it like a holy relic, a cheap, edible shield against creatures of the night. Picture a lonely traveler in 16th century Transylvania. He's bedding down at an inn, but before blowing out the candle, he pulls a bulb of garlic from his pouch. He rubs it along the window frame, then tucks a clove under his pillow. He knows it won't keep away wolves or thieves, but in his mind, it's enough to keep the midnight shadows outside, where they belong. The funny part is, garlic does have real powers. Modern science shows it fights bacteria, improves circulation, even strengthens the immune system. So maybe those villagers weren't entirely wrong. Garlic might not drive away demons, but it did keep people healthier, just enough to earn its reputation as a supernatural bodyguard. Even today, garlic lingers in folklore. In Italy, some families still hang braids in kitchens for good luck. In rural Romania, garlic is smeared on door frames during Christmas to block evil from entering. And in countless vampire films, garlic remains the cheapest special effect. One bulb, and the monster recoils. So the next time you slice into a clove, imagine it not as food, but as a weapon, a humble bulb turned holy. Proof that sometimes the line between pantry and protection is razor thin. And if garlic could keep evil away, the next superstition promised that a simple coin, tossed into water, could invite good fortune in. Superstition number 23, tossing coins in wells. Today, tossing a coin into a fountain feels playful, a tourist tradition, a harmless wish for love, luck, or money. But centuries ago, the act was far from casual. It was an offering to unseen powers. Ancient people believed wells, springs, and fountains were portals, not just water sources, but sacred places where spirits dwelled. The surface shimmered like a mirror between worlds. Drop a coin in, and you weren't just making a wish, you were paying tribute. The Celts, for example, tossed valuables into rivers to honor their gods. Romans threw coins into wells before long journeys, asking for safe passage. The idea was simple: give something shiny, get something sacred in return. Picture a weary traveler in the Middle Ages. He kneels beside a stone well on the edge of a forest. He pulls a silver penny from his pouch. With a whispered prayer, he flicks it into the darkness below. The splash echoes like a secret pact. The coin is gone, but in his mind, fortune has heard him. The superstition wasn't only about generosity. Water itself was powerful. It cleansed, it healed, it gave life. By adding metal, something bright and enduring, you created a bond between human hope and natural magic. That's why archaeologists today still find coins in ancient wells and springs, not dropped by accident, but left as prayers locked in water. Over time, the practice softened. In Renaissance towns, fountains became the center of marketplaces. Children tossed pennies while laughing. Lovers tossed them hand in hand. The ritual lost its sharp edge of fear and became more about dreams. Folklore added rules, of course. Use your right hand over your left shoulder. Make the wish in silence, or it won't come true. And never, ever fish your coin back out. That wasn't just bad manners. It was tempting fate to reverse your blessing. Even today, the tradition thrives. The Trevi Fountain in Rome collects over €1 million a year in coins. All wishes, all hopes, all silent bargains with the water. The money is donated to charity, but the superstition remains. People lean over, flick their coins, and feel a secret thrill. Because maybe, just maybe, the old gods still listen. And that's the beauty of it. The sound of a coin hitting water is tiny, but in that moment, it feels like the universe is listening. A splash as small as a heartbeat, but big enough to carry your hopes downstream. So the next time you stand by a fountain, don't dismiss the urge. Flip a coin, watch it disappear into ripples, because whether you call it superstition or tradition, the ritual ties you to centuries of dreamers who believed water could hold their wishes safe. And while coins invited fortune, the next superstition taught that a certain date invited only disaster. Friday the 13th. Superstition number 24. Fear of Friday the 13th. Some superstitions whisper, others shout, and then there's Friday the 13th, a date that practically screams bad luck. Even today, people rearrange meetings, avoid flights, or refuse to sign contracts if it falls on the calendar. But why this combination? Why a number and a day together spell doom? The roots run deep. 13 has long been considered unlucky. At the Last Supper, there were 13 at the table, and betrayal followed. In Norse legend, Loki crashed a feast as the 13th guest, bringing chaos and death. And in general, 12 felt complete. Months, zodiac signs, hours on a clock. 13 broke the harmony. Friday carried its own heavy weight. Medieval Christians marked it as the day of the crucifixion. Executions often took place on Fridays. Sailors dreaded setting sail that day. It was already loaded with suspicion. Put them together, Friday plus 13, and you had a double curse. A date when the universe stacked the deck against you. Imagine a bustling town in the 1600s. A merchant wakes on Friday the 13th, glances at the calendar and groans. Does he risk opening his shop? Does he travel to market? Or stay home, convinced that disaster waits the moment he steps outside? Even if nothing happens, the weight of the superstition bends the day. Every stumble, every delay, every spilled cup of ale feels like proof. By the 19th century, fear of the date had a name: paraskevedecatriophobia, a mouthful of a word for a belly full of dread. And the stories piled up. A ship said to have launched on Friday the 13th and vanished. Businesses that failed after opening on the cursed date. Every misfortune found a ready scapegoat in the calendar. Folklore added its own rituals. Don't start a journey. Don't marry. Don't cut your nails. Some even refuse to get out of bed at all. Better to waste a day than tempt fate. And yet, the superstition proved strangely profitable. Hotels skipped the 13th floor. Airlines avoided row 13. Even today, architects and planners quietly erase the number, reshaping reality around belief. Pop culture only fueled the fire. The slasher films of the 1980s turned Friday the 13th into a carnival of fear. Now the date wasn't just unlucky, it was cinematic. Proof that superstition, once planted, can grow roots in every era. Of course, skeptics shrug it off. To them, it's just another day. But even the boldest cynic sometimes glances at the date and hesitates, because deep down, humans are wired to find patterns and to fear when those patterns break. So when the next Friday the 13th comes around, maybe you'll walk a little slower. Double check your keys. Hold your breath as you cross the street. Not because you believe in curses, but because centuries of whispers have trained you to. And if Fridays were feared, the next superstition showed that even sleep itself wasn't safe, because some believed only a knife under the pillow could keep nightmares at bay. Superstition number 25, sleeping with a knife under the pillow. Before teddy bears, some people slept with knives, not beside the bed, not hanging on the wall, but right under the pillow, a strange mix of comfort and danger. The belief was simple. Steel could cut more than flesh. It could slice through nightmares, ward off witches, and stab at the unseen shadows that crept through dreams. In rural Europe, parents sometimes slipped small blades under a child's pillow, not to harm, but to protect. They swore it kept evil spirits from sitting on the chest, crushing the breath, or stealing the soul during sleep. What we'd call sleep paralysis, they called a demon's visit, and a knife was the only cure. Picture a farmhouse at night. The wind rattles shutters. The hearth fire burns low. A mother whispers to her son, "Don't be afraid. The knife will guard your dreams." She tucks the blade beneath the straw pillow, kisses his forehead, and blows out the candle. The boy drifts off, comforted not by logic, but by cold steel hidden inches away. The superstition spread far and wide. In Scandinavia, knives were placed near newborns to scare off trolls. In parts of Asia, sharp metal under the bed was thought to sever bad spirits from clinging to sleepers. And in rural England, a folded knife was kept under pillows during storms, believed to protect the house from lightning strikes. One object, endless uses against invisible enemies. Of course, the practice wasn't without risk. Rolling over onto a blade wasn't exactly safe, but fear outweighed reason. Better a cut cheek than a stolen soul. Even in modern times, echoes remain. Some still slip scissors under mattresses or tuck iron beneath pillows, swearing it cuts through nightmares. Others leave steel charms on bedside tables, treating them like dream catchers made of metal. The logic seems wild to us now, but it reveals something timeless. People wanted control over sleep, over the dark hours when the mind was most vulnerable. And if a knife gave peace, then the ritual was worth the danger. So the next time you lay your head down, imagine reaching beneath your pillow, not for a soft cushion, but for a blade, a weapon not against burglars or beasts, but against the weight of the night itself. It's a reminder that superstition was rarely rational, but it always came from the same place: fear, hope, and the desperate wish to feel safe in a world that rarely was.